In the news tonight, the 11th General Assembly of the Middle East Council of Churches opens in Amman with a focus this year on the role of the region's Christian components. A meeting between Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Moscow this week has been put on hold upon a request by the Israeli side. And UN experts say they are investigating past suspected chemical attacks in Syria following reliable information concerning the use of chlorine gas in Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood of Aleppo City. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King received a telephone call from U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, during which they discussed the latest developments in the region. The King and Biden also reviewed the crisis in Syria, as well as international efforts to fight terrorism. The Cabinet adopted the National Strategy for Human Resources Development 2016-2025, which was launched yesterday in the presence of Their Majesties King Abdullah and Queen Rania. During a session chaired by Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki, the Cabinet officially adopted the strategy as a comprehensive reform plan for human resources. It also decided to set up an executive plan for the Human Resources Development Strategy for the next 10 years and allocate the necessary funds for its implementation in the 2017 budget. The 11th General Assembly of the Middle East Council of Churches opened in Amman, which focuses this year on the role of the region's Christian components. The session convened at the invitation of His Beatitude Theophilus III, Greek Patriarch of the Holy City of Jerusalem and all Palestine and Jordan. The three-day conference brings together all 22 presidents of Middle East churches from Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Cyprus, Lebanon, Egypt and Iran, in addition to the four main Eastern church families and other participants from Western churches and international institutions. It will discuss the role of Christians in the Middle East in light of the current social, political and economic situation in the region and the impact of current developments on Christians' presence in the Middle East. Other topics for discussion will include the role of the Council, its future message, and its humanitarian services to the refugees. In his opening speech, Patriarch Theophilus thanked Jordan's leadership and people for hosting the conference, noting the kingdom had been the home and safe incubator for all those who had migrated or had been displaced from their homeland due to wars and persecution. He valued the kingdom's firm stand with Eastern Christians throughout history and its support of their issues and preserving their freedom of faith in holy sites, as well as the country's hosting of refugees. Other church leaders urged speedy action to confront challenges, expressing hope that the conference would come up with recommendations to ease the plight of the oppressed and the Christians in countries under the scourge of war. Bishop Munib Yunan of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land urged the participants to take the Amman message as an inspiration and send a clear and loud message from the Arab East, stressing the need to unify ranks to achieve a comprehensive humanitarian position. Pope Tawadros II of Alexandria and Patriarch of the See of St. Mark said the Church had to assume an effective social role in the service of countries, urging that the voice of Christians should be complementary to that of moderate Muslims to safeguard coexistence in its brightest image despite the difficulties we face. Vicar General of the Bishop, Bassam Shahatit, explained the main purpose of the conference.
This meeting is very important because the Middle East Council of the Churches, long time they are not meeting. This meeting is to work together again and to make the unity of the churches and to help the people and the Christian and the Muslim in the Middle East to stay in the Middle East, because now there is many problems and war, and we need voice of peace, voice of unity, voice to make harmony in all the churches, Christian and Muslim.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that a proposed meeting in Moscow with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not be held for now. Speaking at a news conference in Warsaw with the Polish president, Abbas said the Russian president proposed a meeting on the 9th, to which he agreed, but the Israelis asked for the talks to be put off. Abbas, however, declared he was ready for talks anywhere in the world. On the other hand, Netanyahu said he was ready to meet Abbas at any time, as long as there were no preconditions. The last Israeli-Palestinian peace talks collapsed in 2014.
I am prepared to attend tomorrow or at a time agreed upon, because this dialogue between us and the Israelis is of great importance to me, whether it be in Moscow or any other place, because dialogue is the only way to reach peace for the Palestinian nation and Israel, that they live side by side in security and stability. And with regards to the peace process, the path is blocked due to the Israeli government's abstinence in spite of the valuable and appreciated efforts of the United States and the political and economic support from the European Union, especially with regards to the support of our efforts to rebuild our country's institutions and infrastructure.
The Israeli Prime Minister made his remarks unwilling to meet Abbas during a visit to The Hague and a meeting with the Dutch Prime Minister, but his visit was unwelcome to many. Protesters gathered in The Hague condemning Netanyahu's visit and demanding that the International Criminal Court put him on trial for war crimes. Organizers displayed black boxes with names of children killed in the Gaza Strip in 2014 by the Israeli army.
Our government is not going to do something about it, then we as a people, we as the citizens of the Netherlands and elsewhere around the world should have a say and should make a stand, and that is why I'm here today.
I'm here today to support the Palestinians against Netanyahu, the killer who destroys children's homes, who destroys the homes of the Palestinians and who kills all people and children. Why all of that? What is happening is unfair.
Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Jubeir said there was a possibility of reaching an agreement on a ceasefire in Syria within 24 hours. Al-Jubeir was speaking to reporters in London on the collapse of efforts by the United States and Russia to agree a ceasefire, saying it was not a failure. A cessation of hostilities agreement brokered by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in February unraveled within weeks, with Washington accusing the Syrian government of violating the pact.
I wouldn't describe it as a failure. I think that it's still a work in progress. There is a possibility of arriving at an understanding over the next 24 hours or so, and then we will test the seriousness of Bashar al-Assad and his allies in terms of complying with a ceasefire like this.
Meanwhile, UN experts said that they are investigating past suspected chemical attacks in Syria and called on all powers implicated in the conflict to revitalize the cessation of hostilities. At a news briefing in Geneva, a member of the Independent Commission of Inquiry of Syria said there is reliable information concerning the use of chlorine gas in Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood of Aleppo city, particularly at the beginning of April. However, the UN official did not elaborate on who could have committed the attack. The information came as rescue workers and a monitoring group today reported on a suspected chlorine gas attack in Aleppo, which they say have caused dozens of cases of suffocation. The UN war crimes investigators also denounced the escalation of violence in Syria over the past few months and urged all sides in the conflict to breathe new life into a faltering ceasefire.
The glimmer of hope in February, there has been an evident militarization since the end of March, and that is a great shame and injustice vis-à-vis the civilian population, innocent people. And that's why we are very much emphasizing the need to get back to the negotiation table. Restore and revitalize the cessation of hostilities, minimize civilian casualties, and end indiscriminate attacks on the civilian population.
France said it was deploying artillery to Iraq and readying its aircraft carrier for deployment to reinforce foreign military support for the Iraqi army's expected push to recapture Mosul from Daesh terrorists. French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian told a gathering of defense and military officials in Paris that his country decided to bolster its support of the Iraqi forces this autumn with the aim of recapturing Mosul. Le Drian said that the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier would soon leave for the Middle East. France, the first country to join US-led airstrikes in Iraq, has stepped up aerial operations against Daesh, including in Syria, after several attacks by the group in France. Leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, started their summit in Laos, eager to show to the world that despite challenges that could derail their unity, they remained united. This is the first year the leaders meet after the establishment of the ASEAN community, launched in Kuala Lumpur last year. Topics such as South China Sea disputes, counterterrorism, trade and human rights are expected to be top of the agenda over the next 3 days. Addressing the opening ceremony, Laos President highlighted the achievements of ASEAN over almost 5 decades, particularly the announcement of the ASEAN community on December 31st, 2015. On the sidelines of the meeting, leaders of ASEAN signed an agreement on collective response to disasters. The agreement affirmed the 10-nation bloc's will to respond to disasters inside and outside the region as a body, including establishing a common mechanism and response system. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama announced that Washington would provide an additional $90 million over 3 years to help clear unexploded ordnance left behind in Laos from a secret U.S. bombing campaign that took place over a 9-year period during the Vietnam War. Obama is the first sitting U.S. president to visit Laos. The ASEAN opening was overshadowed by a rift between the presidents of the U.S. and Philippines. The United States looked to highlight the positive elements of the U.S.-Philippines relationship following comments made by Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte that resulted in the U.S. calling off a bilateral meeting between the two nations. Duterte sought to defuse a row with the U.S., voicing regret for using foul language against U.S. President Barack Obama. Instead of the Duterte meeting, Obama held talks with the South Korean president and is also likely to hold an unscheduled meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. Despite the tension, Obama's Deputy National Security Director said the U.S.-Philippine relationship remained rock solid.
With respect to the bilateral meeting, I think it was our judgment that given the focus of attention on President Duterte's comments leading into the meetings here, we felt that that did not create a constructive environment for a bilateral meeting. All of the attention, frankly, was on those comments and therefore not on the very substantive agenda that we have with the Philippines. Again, given that focus, we felt that it wasn't the right time to have a bilateral meeting between the two presidents, and that's something that we discussed with officials from the government of the Philippines last night. Again, going forward, I would expect our close cooperation to continue, and where we also have differences, we'll continue to speak to those.
The campaign for U.S. president can be a hard-fought, bitter battle between rival Democratic and Republican candidates, and this is true for the 2016 presidential campaign. Amid this contentious campaign season, some potential voters say they are simply fed up with the political system, as well as both candidates, and have threatened not to vote in the general election in November. During the Democratic National Convention, a substantial group of Bernie Sanders supporters threatened to withhold their vote from the party nominee Hillary Clinton. On the Republican side, party loyalists like the family of former presidents George H.W. and George W. Bush and past presidential nominee Mitt Romney skipped the Republican National Convention, dissatisfied with Republican nominee Donald Trump. Political prognosticators are left to guess now who and how many people will show up at the polls on Election Day on November 8th. The Paralympic flame arrived to Rio de Janeiro, setting the stage for the 2016 Rio Paralympics, which officially start tomorrow. The Paralympic cauldron was lit during a ceremony just outside Rio's brand new Museum of Tomorrow, part of the Olympic Boulevard inaugurated ahead of the Rio Olympics. The Paralympics will run till the 18th. FIFA said that its ethics watchdog had opened a case against Vice President of the Qatar Football Association, former General Secretary of the Association, Saud al-Muhannadi, based on the final report submitted by the investigatory chamber. Last month, a FIFA investigator recommended that Muhannadi be banned from the game for at least 2.5 years for non-cooperation with an inquiry. Although FIFA did not say what was the subject of the inquiry, it is not connected with the 2022 World Cup, which Qatar will host. And finally, fair conditions continue for the rest of tonight with northwesterly light to moderate winds. Normal summer conditions prevail in hilly areas tomorrow, but it remains relatively hot in the Badia, the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea with northwesterly moderate winds. Hot conditions continue in the Gulf of Aqaba, while winds will be northerly moderate and the seas slightly high. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And before we go, all ministries and public institutions will observe a holiday starting from Sunday, September 11th through Thursday, September 15th on the occasion of Eid al-Adha, the feast of sacrifice that marks the end of the Muslim pilgrimage season, Al-Hajj. A statement to this effect was issued today by the Office of Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The 11th General Assembly of the Middle East Council of Churches opens in Amman with a focus this year on the role of the region's Christian components. A meeting between Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Moscow this week has been put on hold upon a request by the Israeli side. And UN experts say they are investigating past suspected chemical attacks in Syria following reliable information concerning the use of chlorine gas in Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood of Aleppo City. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.